Hello everyone, this is my first ever YouTube video and it's called Loving a Narcissist Online, a Contemporary Love Affair, the story of Olivia Cruelheart. I met a woman online on September the 25th, 2016. I knew the first time I saw her portrait that she was someone of inordinate significance to me, so significant that I almost scrolled past her profile because I didn't think she'd be interested in me. Anyway, I messaged her and she replied and was terrified throughout the initial interaction, expecting her to withdraw at any time. When I explained my situation, that I had an autism spectrum disorder and was on benefits living with my parents, I expected communication to cease. When she said it didn't matter whether I had money or not because she had her own, I thought I'd found a diamond. We interacted for a few days and suddenly on the Tuesday I was amazed when the woman, Olivia, said, "I'd never been in a long-distance relationship before. I prefer it if you were close by, but it's better to have contact with a quality person than go with someone just because they are local." Anyway, once we got past the hurdle of my worklessness and poverty, things developed rapidly. Olivia talked of our meeting later in the year. I thought we could share costs and take it from there. She impressed me and I thought she was someone who had the qualities to allow us to overcome the barrier of the distance. When I met her, I told her I couldn't take her to the bar she liked, and I told her I was poor and I said her family would be against me and her friends would advise her against me. She said she didn't mind because I was a great person. Later this was downgraded to nice person. Maybe I should have known then, since women are avaricious. Many people have told me that she had to be fake because I have no money, which is a depressing criteria for someone's inauthenticity, that the significance of my objectivity is such that she couldn't possibly be interested in me. I guess people were right because in the end she left me for a rich older man. But I was always honest to her. What's the point of lying when all you have is the truth and whatever qualities you can try to share with someone? The first few weeks were glorious, our relationship deepened progressively, and she was sending me the in love emote regularly and saying things like, "You're so cute" and "You make me smile a lot." This period of our relationship was really beautiful, and it was born of her engagement with me and an investment of her time. When she was idealizing me, she was engaged and invested and available. She was a beautiful, mature, sincere, compassionate, professional person that I loved deeply. During this phase, she was available all day and would chat to me as she left work, tell me what she was doing, talk to me about where she was, and discuss aspects of her daily reality with me. When she did this, our relationship was amazing, and we experienced heightened states of being via one another as part of the banal reality we escaped via the qualities we experienced via one another. It was a beautiful relationship. The patterns of our communication were rarely consistent, however, and became the source of the derivation of significance via one another. Olivia began to manifest differences of significance within the relationship via the form of our interaction, and this introduced dynamics that I didn't understand at all until after the relationship was over. I became the source of the derivation of esteem via progressive and continuous effacement of my significance, as she derived significance via manifesting my progressive insignificance. In the beginning, this progressive invalidation and devaluation was imperceptible, and the changes were incremental, very minute, too small for me to be able to ask her about the changes without me appearing possessive, paranoid or needy, because I wanted to appear like a relaxed person who would support her. I never asked her about these changes and thereby never instantiated any boundary. The first sign of devaluation was about the third week, when she stopped being in contact while she was out, and she started to compartmentalise me to the time in her apartment. Suddenly she was no longer available when she left work, and she began to only put Skype on when she wanted it on, so that she had control of the patterns of interaction. I was beginning to be situated in relation to a need and a compartment, her apartment. Suddenly secrecy was introduced. She stopped messaging me about her day before she got to her apartment, and wouldn't be in touch when she was out at night anymore. So there was a behavioural change manifesting the significant boundary that was being practically instantiated. At the time I missed this and let it go because she used to come online as soon as she got into her apartment, and we would often share beautiful moments joking about her showering and the eroticism of her wet hair, and I would affectionately cajole her to video call with her wet hair. We shared many beautiful playful moments like this. As time went on, however, the devaluation was progressive and manifest via the pushing back of our time together ever later. As I lost significance, this was manifest by her disinvestment, which was manifest via our spending less and less time with one another. Throughout, changes in the form of her engagement were manifest via changes in the form of our interaction, as she casually manifested her disinvestment. Within days I realised she was always in bars, often quite late, and she justified this to me on the basis of her work, saying entertaining clients is just part of my work. I realised early that she would be out until late 2 or 3 times a week, and this got progressively worse as the relationship progressed and devaluation ensued. For the first fortnight she'd send me photos of where she was, and I immediately realised that she must always be with men because there were never anyone in the photos. Because she was always out and always with men, I always felt insecure, particularly because she never told me anything about where she was or who she was with the exception of one night when she got back after midnight and told me that she'd been chatted up by a 25-year-old Australian banker. This must have been a major source of esteem for her because she never told me about anyone else, although all I ever heard was guy friend and work colleague throughout the relationship. I got the sense that when we met, she'd been hurt by one of these Western men. It was obvious to me that class and race mattered a great deal to her. It was apparent she coveted Western businessmen. Because I sensed she'd been hurt, I tried to give her the highest quality appreciation I could. I wanted her to feel how special she was. I wanted her to never feel second best to anyone in the world, and I just wanted to help give her a quality of appreciation that would give her courage and hope in the world of her life. I knew how lonely she must be to want an online relationship with someone so far away, and all I wanted to do was commit to her and give her the most human relational experience that I could. I knew I could only offer love, and I knew I could never compete with anyone else on any level. Obviously, it was doomed. I tried hard to appreciate her and share her with herself. She said, "You always make me feel special." The last day before she left for Christmas, she said she felt she belonged wherever I was, and I found her some jobs here, but she never looked at them. Throughout November, things were different. She was out more regularly and was often distant. I didn't know what to make of it. Suddenly she disappeared overnight for the first time. She went out and then never messaged me on her return, saying that her phone battery went. Later on the final day of November she ghosted me for the first time, missing overnight, no word beforehand. She said I'd never do anything to endanger what we share, and I'd never do anything I'd regret, and I berated myself for doubting her. I had a constant internal dialogue questioning her that made me hate myself. I knew I had no reason to doubt her, but I felt disquiet throughout, and my life had begun to alternate between anxiety and confusion. But when Olivia engaged, our relationship was sublime. She said that she'd try and find a Wi-Fi spot for us to have contact over Christmas, but I never heard from her, and she returned after Christmas on the 6th of January. Suddenly things were not quite the same, but I felt we'd get back into the swing of our interactions. Suddenly on the 11th she sent me a message saying she wanted our interaction to be more normal and not to think that she loved me any less. Clearly she was indicating she wanted less contact with me, and I wondered why there was a need to state this when I'd never pressured her. Suddenly, within days of returning, she seemed to turn cold and distant. One night she came on and I felt a chill run through me. It was sinister, and her textual manner was suddenly radically different. I didn't think we'd see the week out, especially when she missed 2 nights. Whereas before Christmas she always explained if she was very late back, suddenly she did not volunteer an explanation. Before Christmas, when she was missing overnight, she immediately volunteered an explanation of why she had not been in touch. Suddenly, in January, she didn't even try. I asked her, "Did you meet someone?" and she just said no. I was so worried that I never asked further, mainly because I got the sense that any kind of question irritated her, even though she shared less and less with me. As a character change, I had no idea what was going on. The relationship was never stable in its interactional forms. Everything about it fluctuated. There was rarely consistency. You always wondered what could be behind these shifts. Of course you always worry that changes in expressivity mirror the influence of particular others. Are you detecting the traces of shifts in commitment born of strategization? She remained distant. Her character shift appeared to be permanent. This was like a different person. She was critical of me for the first time, and I didn't think we'd get out of the second week of January. I just knew she had contempt for me. I knew she no longer loved me, and I knew she must have connected with someone else. Whereas we used to always express our love for one another, now suddenly Olivia was reticent. Her responses were obligatory. She was attempting to avoid manifesting affection, and I knew her feelings had died, but I could not understand why, since she'd been away and our time together was only days before these changes entrenched. I was fearful we'd not see out the week. If I sought reassurance, the form of her response contradicted what she avowed. One night I asked her, "Do you still love me?" and she replied, "If you ask me again, this is over." Another time I asked her, "Is everything okay between us?" and she replied, "OFC." It was clear she no longer loved me. The second week of January she ghosted me over the weekend, and I was worried sick. But she came on, never told me anything, and I asked her, "Did you meet someone?" and she simply replied, "No." So I knew in January the relationship had crossed a huge threshold, and we would probably never go back. I knew her heart was no longer in it, but because What she said contradicted her behaviour. I stayed in it wanting to be a good partner in case she was merely tired. Later in the relationship she used the same excuse, Skype problems, to cover ghosting me on a Friday night. Whereas once she told me when she was going out, now she told me nothing. I had to sit anxiously waiting to see whether she'd come on. When she missed 2 consecutive nights, I would sit waiting for over 60 hours wondering whether our relationship was over and wondering whether I'd ever hear from her again. I have wondered whether someone came back into her life in January to promote the change, or whether she had an abortive attempt at an affair, having sex and then getting dumped. Maybe she spent Christmas with someone else. I was sure she broke up just before she met me because she said, "My life sucks, you're the best thing that's happened to me this year." And I got the sense she was in pain, and that was why I tried so hard to make her feel the real beauty of her and her inordinate value. I wanted to restore her esteem so she felt protected by the love of someone who esteemed her beyond everyone, and I tried to give all I could in the hope that it would inspire loyalty. I hoped that if I gave her the best I could, she'd feel a bond of honour. Somehow it mattered for little. While she'd turned cold overnight for a period of about 3 weeks, things seemed to suddenly come back to normal, and in late January she said, "I think it's impossible for me to meet someone," an expression I realised now that she'd borrowed from me. She was mirroring. I noticed she often told lies that mirrored my own life. She said, for example, that she had been celibate for 4 years because she knew I'd been celibate a long time, and I knew this had to be a lie, but I just thought she wanted me to feel that she was close to me and I was less alone, so I never understood the phenomenon. Despite the coldness of early to mid-January, by the end of January things seemed to disappear, and we had the following wonderful exchange. I say I love you, and she said I love you too, Simon, and I say I'm lucky you don't make the same judgment as 99%, and she says no I don't, I find no need to judge others. And I said you are special, and she says you make me feel comfortable. I think you're the first person that I can talk to about anything without any worry. I mean, considering that we never met. And I said, well, I'm glad I want to be a source of solace and love for you, so you feel your humanity through me. And she said, and you are special to me. And I said, I don't have anything else to offer you, only humanity. And she said, well, that's good enough. I'm glad we met. You know you're important to me. You always make me feel special. It might feel awkward when we first meet in person, but I'm sure we will get comfortable in no time. This is what I'm afraid of. I'm scared you might feel that I don't value you as much. That's why I feel it's important for us to see each other in person. You know I'm not good in expressing myself. When we're together, you'll know how much I value you, and I want you to stay in my life, and you are allowed to have me. You know I love you. That would be very special. First touch, first kiss. And I said, I would like to see your face while you are sleeping. I'm sure you look beautiful. And she said, you're so sweet. So we went from utter coldness and ghosting to this. I always loved the beautiful, playful, soulful intimacy that characterised our relationship when she engaged, and at this point I assumed she was stressed with work. I didn't understand at all the type of person I was dealing with. She'd always blown hot and cold, and I'd been too naive to guess what possibilities there might be. I didn't even know the term ghosting, and I didn't want to demand of her, so I let everything go. As the relationship went on, I started to feel I should know something about the personal topography of her life. As the relationship matured, I felt that she should share more with me. I wanted to be a source of solace for her. What perturbed me was that she started pushing me back, coming on later and later, as if interaction had become a chore and she shared less and less. She was out in bars every night, and if I asked questions it was just all guy friend, work colleague. Because she always blew hot and cold, I just took it as tiredness, but now I realise maybe there were others floating around in the background. When she got attention, affirmation, affection, possibly more from other men, she didn't need it from me and she blew cold. If she had a barren week without sufficient attention, then I was her ego battery there to provide love via her phone. It's easy for beautiful women to get sex, real love, quality, appreciation, sincerity, and authenticity manifest in the rare significance of someone constitutes us via our rare qualities. One so rarely meets people who make us feel loved. Anyway, I never heard anyone's name or a context, and she never explained anything to me. She stopped sharing. My guess is she was dating all the time and saying they were friends. Things seemed okay between us from the end of January until February when Olivia went to Bali with a female friend. Without her harem, Olivia was great and our relationship was powerful. We shared beautiful times together over that week, video calling every night and talking for long periods. I guess this should have manifest why she blew cold. There must have been particular others in Singapore that elicited her commitment. We shared an amazing final day, chatting all the time until she boarded. My final message to her being, travel safely, Godspeed, always remember how much I love you. I stayed up waiting for a message. She'd touched down safely and even checked my tablet throughout the night in the hope of a message. The next day she explained, I'm not used to being in a relationship and I should have said, are we in one? But I let it go. Looking back, I'm sure she must have messaged someone to organise her weekly activities. Because the times we'd shared in Bali had been so wonderful, I felt really optimistic about our relationship. Olivia had been playful, affectionate, loving and sensuous with me. The intimacy we shared was glorious. The first night she came online after returning, I couldn't wait to talk with her. But I was immediately aware that there was a difference. I sensed the distance immediately, and I got the same sense of coldness that had chilled me to my bone in January. I realised after, this must have indicated that she knew what she was going to do. These withdrawals had to be intentional. After the intimacy we'd shared every day in Bali, I expected our interaction to be suffused with its usual playful affection and sexual illusion that made us feel part of one another. But as I tried to initiate intimacy, Olivia turned away. She closed the interaction down. She knew where I was trying to take the conversation, and she could tail that conversational path, and I knew this meant she felt the intimacy was invasive. Only 24 hours earlier, we'd been so loving toward one another, and suddenly the whole tenor of our interaction was different. Within days, on my birthday, she said suddenly that the distance was too great, and that she'd be glad if I met someone here, which frustrated me because of the lengths I'd gone to in order to explain that I couldn't. That was why I was on the internet. I think this was projection. I think she'd been looking and had already found my replacement. It was as if she decided I was a friend without telling me, and as if she thought that if she merely treated me as a friend, then I would discern the reality and adapt accordingly. She continued to be distant throughout what was left of our relationship. I think she knew she had someone coming into her life in a few weeks. On the 16th of March she said, "You're so cute, I love you so much," and that was the last time that she ever said she loved me. The day after, the 17th of March, she said she had missed me at work. On the 18th of March she went walking, and when she got back I noticed she had eyeliner on but didn't mention it. Then around the 20th I noticed she was out later than usual, for her midnight instead of 11 p.m, and I worried. I suspected she'd met someone, and I knew that if she started to miss weekends then it was over. Surely enough, around the weekend of the 18th she missed the Thursday and the Saturday, saying she had friends visiting from Shanghai. I was worried sick. Then she came on and said she was bored on the Friday and went off early. A short time later she started saying negative things to me about my negativity and lack of confidence. On the 26th she missed, and the 27th she said this can't work even if we try very hard. It was the first time she'd ever mentioned our relationship not working. She'd never ever suggested that our relationship was bad, but I guess when she was alone I was a source of esteem to her. I think her perspective changed because she'd met someone. Suddenly her whole behavioural pattern shifted. Whereas she used to shunt me to the end of the day and talk to me last thing before sleeping, suddenly she was going to bed 2 and 3 hours early. I knew she never sleeps before 1 a.m. and rarely goes to bed before 12:30 a.m, so I knew this was likely a lie. She went to bed at 9, at 10 past 10 and at 10:20 on consecutive nights. I knew this change in behaviour manifests something significant. If she was trying to sustain the illusion of a relationship and all she has is 10 minutes per day, then there must be something more significant occurring. On the 28th we had the following conversation after she'd been ill in bed. "Olivia, I didn't cut contact with everyone. You make me tired, keep asking me if I've met anyone. I know you need contact, but I do have my own life here, and time different and etc. make it very difficult to log in every day and stay late just to keep the contact, and so you don't feel I have ignored you. Frankly, it's your insecurities the cause. I can't make you feel important most of the time. I tried to let you know, no matter what, this between us don't have expiry date unless we decide to call it off, but you didn't get what I meant. I'm tired of trying to make you feel important every time, especially when you're drinking. It gets worse. I don't want to deal with all this question, especially when I'm not feeling well. I can't help it if you didn't have trust in me. I've tried, and with the time I've invested just to keep this between us should be enough for you to understand how significant you are to me, but I guess I've failed, and failed badly." Notice how she uses deflection to avoid the central issues. I didn't cut contact with everyone, a statement which is of huge significance since I was supposed to be her boyfriend, and manifests that particular others were far more significant to her. If she was too ill to communicate with me, why was she not too ill to contact others? Notice how she reframes the discussion, focusing on the time difference. She claims to have been laying in bed ill for 3 days. What difference does the time difference make? The time difference had never been a problem in the first 3 months when we chatted for 3 and 4 hours, so why is it suddenly a problem? What she is evading is that my significance to her has changed. The only truthful statement is that it's my life here that's making it difficult for her to log in, because I no longer matter to her. What we also see is how she scapegoats me. It's my insecurity that is to blame for her behaviour and the problem in the relationship, and she closes out with a pity play as if her behaviour warrants anyone's sympathy. It's also worth noting how she overlooks the particular issue being unavailable and construes me as ungrateful. It was never a matter of gratitude, but of what was happening in our relationship. You can see how devaluation entails negation by the way she mentions my drinking. I only drink 1 bottle of wine per week, and we shared many beautiful times together while I drank. But she wishes to construe this negatively because it was often obligatory for her. I was very intimate with her when I drank, and so she experienced it as onerous. We see how devaluation entails negation. As devaluation entrenches, negation is progressive, and as she progressively manifests my insignificance behaviourally, I lose the ability to count in any way, and invalidation constitutes her perception of me to such a degree that she needs to construct details negatively in order to smear me. On the 10th of March she said, "I love talking to you," and on the 27th she said she found the relationship taxing. We see that persons are not consistent entities, and instead their characteristics change as her needs change. What is clear is that there is an intentional aspect to these changes. They are psychologically driven. This is why there is cruelty at work in these interactions. A sudden change in pattern was now evident. She had reduced me to the final few minutes before bed, usually coming on past 11 and talking to me until going to sleep about 12:30 a.m. Suddenly she started to come on much earlier and say she was going to sleep, but it was too early for her to be sleeping. I was sure she was going somewhere else. Anyway, on the 23rd she came on and at 9 p.m. Said she was going to sleep, and then missed the 25th completely, and then the 26th she came online for only 10 minutes, going off at 10 p.m, and the 27th she came on for 10 minutes, going off at 10:20 p.m, saying she was going to sleep. The 28th she came on for 15 minutes only and went off really early. I think she went somewhere after all these nights. She never sleeps at 10 p.m. And then the 29th she missed, and then the 30th she came on at 12:15 a.m. and told me that she'd been out with an Australian friend she'd not been seen for a long time, who had just got back to Singapore from a business trip. So I said, if he's just got back to Singapore, why are you his first port of call? And she said, why all this funny thinking? He thinks you sound really weird, and also remarks that this type of relationship can be really taxing. So she was authorising her view of our relationship via someone she just met. I think she was with him the days prior to this, and the comment about our relationship was from him. I know she met the Australian man before the 30th. She said on the 27th that this relationship cannot work even if we both try really hard. So she was probably already sleeping with him. The next day she wanted to break up for the first time since the relationship had begun. After the 30th she never came on Skype at night again, and never used her private Skype again. She was with him every night, I assume. During the final conversation on the night of the 30th, I sought to be conciliatory. I said that relationships were about affirmation, and she said, I don't like that. Even though she'd sought affirmation from the Australian by besmirching my character, next day she was totally different, wanted out of the relationship. She got really nasty, said lots of nasty things about me. She was really arrogant and haughty and disdainful. We spoke 2 days after, and I, like an idiot, said, is there anyone else involved? And she lied and said no. All she said was, I can't give you what you want. This in a relationship that had consisted of talking with one another. I only expected whatever she wanted to share. I said, let's give it a week, and I'll not question you anymore and see how you feel, and she agreed. I always regret now that we never spoke fully. I never had chance to tell her how much I loved her and all that she'd meant to me. I realised over the next few days that she was never going to have the conversation and that it was over. She was unavailable every night, probably sleeping with the Australian. She was nasty to me on her work Skype. Anyway, on the 5th of April she sent me a message saying, I can't wait for a glass of wine, I'm tired out, and it was meant for a work colleague. Later, I called her and she was in a bar. She looked high on drugs, she was a different person, she was arrogant and nasty to me. She saw me and looked nastily, and I said, I want to talk to you, and she said, you can talk to me here, and I said, I don't want to talk to you in a bar while you're with another man. This might be the last conversation we ever have. I want to talk to you privately. I said, you're seeing someone, aren't you? And she said, no. And I said, are we still in a relationship? And she clearly understood our agreement of a week early because she said yes. She was giggling manically. I was sure she was high on something. The way she was throwing her head around and giggling into her hand as she turned away was almost hysterical. It was obvious she was high on dopamine and oxytocin. The thrill of prestigious new supply had breathed life into her soul. The more prestigious the partner, the more intoxicated they appear. They are creatures of the public light, deriving their value from connecting with those possessed of public distinction. She looked at me with contempt and spat the words, you're so difficult, you know that, stifling a shared giggle with a new boyfriend as I answered. She was showing off the exclusivity of a bond with a new partner, using me as a foil for the derivation of a shared experience of their public value. As I looked at her, she said accusatorily, "Why can't you look at me?" She said she'd be back in an hour, and I knew it was a lie, but found the exchange so harrowing I just wanted to end the conversation. Anyway, she obviously slept with Australian, and early next morning sent me a text saying, "I just want to be friends because you only want to talk about us," and that was that. She deleted me from Skype and Line the next day after I messaged her angrily saying she was already seeing someone. She sent me a message a week later saying she had met someone new and was starting a relationship and we were just friends. She produced an account of the occurrences that she believed, but her behaviour didn't attest to that reality. She'd been sleeping with him weeks and lying to me while knowing the anguish she was causing, and then blaming me for the insecurity arising from sensing the lies and betrayal. She was living with the Australian immediately. She told me she loves him and they have great chemistry and that he treats her better than she expected, and he's the most cultured man that she's ever met and she respects his work. There never was any closure, never any discussion, just an attempt to downgrade me to a function she'd started to treat me in terms of at the end of February on her return from Bali. She blamed the loss of her feelings on my insecurity. When I tried to discuss the relationship, she said, "Forget all the negative stuff, it's really not attractive." I found this really saddening because she knows how much I suffer over my appearance. She told me she loved me on the 17th of March, and she said, "I love talking to you more than anyone." On the 10th of March, 2 weeks later, she said our relationship was taxing. She betrayed me to another man in order to initiate intimacy between them. She told him about me, not me about him, and said negative things, betrayed me as a bad person in order to initiate sex with him. She played the victim in the bar. She was showing off to him by being aggressive towards me because she had told him I was being aggressive towards her. She said, "When you drink, you get confrontational." Only once did I ever argue with her because she had been out with 3 different men in a week and fell asleep after getting in after typing hello. I regret it now, and I regret the crossed words we had. We argued 3 times in 6 months. I should not have said anything bad to her. I deeply regret we didn't cherish all our time together, and I regret ever saying a bad word to her. But I felt neglected when she'd been out all night with another man and then fell asleep after saying hello. It's all changed so fast. I guess the relationship was always in flux. And so once she had set up a replacement for me, the discard phase would play out rapidly because it was just a matter of Olivia obscuring from me the reality for as long as she could until she had embedded the Australian and begun sleeping with him every night, no longer needing me as company for her apartment. From me being interesting for her to being taxing took 2 weeks. I felt she was seeing someone after the 18th. I could tell she was going off earlier. She was going to his, he lives nearby. So I had to question her. She said this was interrogating her, and she said I had no right to do this. She said it was me who destroyed her feelings. Anyway, that is that. I'd rather have died than lose her. Now I'd rather be dead than miss her. I miss her so much every second. Somehow the missing her distorts my sense of time, and I feel the longing grip in my chest, as if all my body is a beacon of radiating feelings for her. When a person evokes the best of you, it's a powerful source they connect you to. She was a medium of my best. I had forgotten that that person still existed, that she evoked, and I loved her with every nascent power that my being could muster. It's so hard when you've given so much to a person. You become intertwined via the meanings you share, and it's like a space you inhabit that enriches your soul. And when they withdraw, you lose access to the space you created, and your world feels impoverished. It's like someone strangling your soul because you lost a vital medium of your existence. It's awful. It's like living a death. Love is everything. It transforms your life, but if they go, it's the worst pain, and it goes on and on. I wish I could have died in my sleep rather than lose her. And when they cease contact, it's crucifying. When she argued, she just pursued the goal she wanted, like the night she met the Australian. I said something to her about relationships being affirmation, and she said I just don't like that, and yet she'd been besmirching me to him, offering him the opportunity to affirm her and play a sympathetic role. She would also make little jokes that were hurtful, that were probably indications of what she was really doing. When we were still talking and meeting, she said she'd have to practice sexual positions before we met, which was hurtful. Another time she said she'd have to get an English boyfriend to improve her English. She also spoke obliquely, was never forthcoming and easily influenced. She was the most evasive and ambiguous person I ever met, lying by omission where possible. I got the sense that she just absorbs the situation and mirrors whoever she feels has power. We did share some beautiful times early on when she was lonely. It was tied to her flat. My viability relied on her being alone. As soon as she was out with other men, she never bothered with me, and I was just a duty at the end of the day. When I met her, she'd lost hope of getting what she wanted, a Western businessman with money, apartment, car, expense account, etc. So because she'd been used a lot by such men, I got the sense she said relationships with Westerners end in tears. and was hurting, she accepted my love. I am myself desperate, and so I'm sensitive, and I offered a high quality of love to her, which she appreciated when she was hurt. But as we passed into the new year, she changed, she devalued me and sorted out a life there, probably using dating apps. I remember her telling me of a man telling her about Tinder, and she told him, she said I told him I'm not available, but I wonder now whether they were discussing dating apps. Anyway, come 2017, she found a lot more men friends and was out every night. More sinister was how she changed. She became a different person. I guess now she was going out with good-looking Western businessmen, probably getting laid and then dumped and taking it out on me. When she would get back, I could sense like a different person, and she'd be critical of me and say I like confident men, and I will notice them as soon as they come in. And she knew I had no confidence. She'd say I was so negative and it wasn't attractive. I didn't realise how painful the whole 6-month relationship had been. I hoped it had come good again, as it had when she went to Bali. But when she got back from Bali, that was a cut-off, and she knew what she was going to do then, I think. I remember the change in her. She never wanted intimacy again between us. It all felt different after her return. I think she knew the Australian was coming back into town, and I think she was already texting and flirting with him and setting up the transition so that when he got back, she could just immediately start seeing him. She was seeing him immediately from the week before I ever heard of him, I think. Her behaviour changed so radically that some significant change occurred in her life, and I can't imagine she was sitting texting someone who lived so close by. After the discard, you really start to deal with the effects of things that were barely perceptible to you during the relationship. You just don't understand how the subtle changes, the carefully veiled contempt with which you are being treated, as a sense of value is extorted via you, will affect you. Because there's no honesty within the relationship, and because your partner is covertly orchestrating your discard while triangulating you with others continuously, you can't know what's happening. You can only discern the underlying reality via your partner's expressivity. Because narcissists derive esteem via you, devaluation is an essential aspect of your experience of being with them. They reciprocally constitute your negation progressively, and this causes anxiety. It's done so surreptitiously that you can't accuse them of doing it without appearing to be insecure and needy, and so, not wanting to appear clingy or codependent, you go along with the drizzle of indifference, all the while trying to lift your partner and initiate the intimacy and connection you enjoy. And what they do is they destroy the fabric of the bond between you. You can't reconstitute the bond that you share. If they don't engage, the very way that you forge the relationship via shared significance just disappears. And I said this to her when we very first met. I said we have to close the distance via creating meanings via which we feel close to one another and via which we appreciate one another, so that we feel loved by one another. Via such processes, narcissists produce desperation and lead you to try harder to reach them and make them feel feelings that will elicit the reciprocity that characterize the early idealization phase of the relationship. All the time you sense you might be replaced and you worry continuously, and via ensuring a virtually continuous withdrawal from you, they ensure you undergo racing thoughts and obsessive thoughts about them. Effacement of you leads to a despair-induced love, as the dopamine and oxytocin of intermittent reinforcement mix with the stress hormones cortisol and adrenaline and magnify the physiological substrate of love until you become an addict for the person who is effectively mistreating you. Such trauma bonds are harder to break than healthy bonds, and your life after discard becomes one of managing this addiction while coping with the panic and despair of such a sudden loss. The real effects of such relational dynamics become apparent only when you are alone. Chief among them is grief, manifest as kinesthetic pain throughout the nervous system. I suffered night terror, panic. It was as if my whole body was ringing with pain. My anguish was like a physical malady encompassing every element of my body. My brain felt like it was burning and pressing through my forehead. And this experience of aching was continuous. My body was swimming in stress hormones, and I had constant nightmares. Retching on waking, panic, disturbed sleep, the most appallingly anguished crying I've ever endured. And I've had many bad times in my life. The pain was excoriating. While you endure these physical symptoms, you must deal with the torture of the confusion that is the result of the constant turmoil at the heart of the valuation-devaluation hot-cold dynamic that's caused you such anxiety throughout the relationship. You feel torn and unable to comprehend what has occurred. Not only have you lost someone you love deeply, but your mind has to reconcile the cognitive dissonance arising from the disparity between their avowals and their behaviour. When what is disclosed doesn't tarry with what is said, it confuses at a primordial level, and your gut senses what your mind cannot discern. Your mind, focusing upon what is avowed as a linguistically constituted entity, has to irrationally accept the lies you are told for fear of being perceived as unreasonable, but your gut and heart feel a disquiet, antipathy and malaise that is an effect of what is behaviourally manifest. The gap between message and medium is extreme, and this is highly aversive, and you'll deal with this for months after breakup. Not only did you lose someone you loved suddenly amidst a pack of lies, but you have to come to terms with behaviour that is highly confusing. Victims feel violated as they are forced to come to terms with the fact that the person they love was not who they felt they were. When the expressive physiognomy of someone you love changes so radically, so quickly, that they look like a different person, incarnating different values, and their eyes and voice and gestures change, then it's deeply disturbing, particularly when some kind of post-discard humiliation is part of the degradation of being smeared and blamed. Depression and suicidal ideation ensue as humiliation and self-blame eat up the victim. For months my body felt utterly toxic, and the guilt I felt was so extraordinary that I felt I should be arrested for some heinous crime. I felt unworthy of living. I felt I'd lost the most beautiful, precious, significant person that I'd ever met. You feel overwhelmed by loneliness, exhausted, damaged, hopeless, trapped, anxious, fearful, and in a generally heightened state of arousal. Because of the disparity between the account you've been fed by your partner and the reality manifest via their behaviour, post-traumatic stress disorder or complex post-traumatic stress disorder become a prominent aspect of the aftermath, as the mind desperately replays moments in an attempt to establish the authenticity of the relationship. It's easy to become haunted by the person you loved as you desperately try to establish what the reality of the relationship was. Your mind races with possibilities, and so self-doubt and guilt ensue. You become unsure, uncertain and dispossessed of initiative. I guess relationships like this teach one how the interpersonal fabric that binds us, that is the basis of our growth and well-being, can be mutilated, decimating those embroiled in webs of intelligibility that have become distorted by ill will and malevolence, so that decent people, without knowing, become embroiled in a toxic and annihilating dynamic that only damages them. The very intimacy of the relationship magnifies damage whose invasiveness arises from the significance of the individual. The more you love someone, the more their recognition matters, so that the devaluation that characterises the bulk of the relationship only embroils you in negating mediations that destroy your esteem. And that's the end of it.